Senator Alex Antic, thanks for joining us again on Flow.
Thanks, Ricky.
You've seen some commentary, Paul Starrick in The Advertiser, for instance, saying there might be talk of a split within the state Liberal Party and a reforming of the Liberal and Country League, and then there's talk of restarting Family First. We're all happy campers within the Liberal Party, are we?
Well, look, I read that myself and was a bit taken aback. This business about the Liberal Country League was really news to me. So it's not something I can give you too much clarification on, but certainly the reformation of the Family First Party is real. That's certainly something that I'm told is happening and will be re-registered. And it's interesting sort of concept because to me it sort of, I think, shows the genuine level of concern out there amongst socially conservative communities, church communities, faith-based groups about the trajectory of the social policy agenda in SA. And a lot of this stuff's been happening interstate, but we've seen a lot of it here in SA. We've seen the late-term abortion bill get through Parliament. We've seen euthanasia get up, and now we're talking about another dig at the prostitution decriminalisation bill. So I think what it says to me is that there is a feeling out there in the community that social conservatives are not being listened to at the moment, and this is a natural reaction. Now, I've got a particular view about minor parties and how effective they can be, but certainly it shows that, in my mind, it's never been more important for socially conservative people to be involved in the very machinery of political parties.
And how does that work out for a socially conservative person in the Liberal Party? I mean, it's a bit frustrating. You read that article from Paul Starrick and there's unnamed sources. It's always frustrating to see unnamed sources from within your own party commenting, but there must be some disgruntlement that social conservatives aren't getting heard within the Liberal Party when it comes to major policy decisions by the government.
I think there's certainly a feeling out there in the wider political community that the socially conservative agenda is not being heard. I think that's certainly true. We've seen these policies get through state parliament, and look, I mean, the Liberal Party is ultimately, historically, was a conglomerate of a range of different, basically socially conservative groups. You had the Libertarians on the one hand, and the people you might describe as patriots. They're probably almost one nation types in today's language, and then the social conservatives as well as those who are a little bit more to the left of politics as well. So we've always been a broad church, and it's a phrase that gets hacked around a lot, but it is true. And I think there are going to be times where there are going to be seen to be ructions inside a political party. As I said, I don't know about any real moves for a breakaway inside the Liberal Party. That's news to me. I don't think ultimately those actions are helpful. I think that the parties of government are the ones that really control the policy agenda, and so for me the importance in terms of social policy reform is having the major parties with a strong conservative base.
Well, I don't know if it's helpful to talk about hypotheticals, but you look at those topics, the social conservative topics like, say, abortion or euthanasia. Is there any scenario whereby they could be revisited, maybe wound back under a future Liberal government?
Look, I think, all these things, politics, as we know, Ricky, is a numbers game, and it is a hypothetical, but I think once bills are in place, they're hard to unhinge, but unhook, but certainly reform is always available both directions. You have to look at what the President of Hungary is doing, or Prime Minister of Hungary, I should say, is doing at the moment. They've passed some incredible laws to protect children at schools over transgender rights. And those bills, one of them recently was passed 157, I think, to 1, which just goes to show that the politics is a numbers game. Politics is for those who show up. So, for my mind, social conservatives getting involved in politics and political parties is a critical thing to achieving what you've just described, which might be, trying to get some of these bills looked at. I don't think there's much chance of them being repealed, but certainly there are some edges that could be trimmed off very easily, I would have thought.
But to what extent do you think that Parliament is simply reflecting society when it comes to the votes on these things? You see opinion polls regularly saying, for instance, the euthanasia changes needed to happen. So why wouldn't politicians simply reflect where society seems to be? Is there a challenge for social conservatives in society to make their case just within the community?
It's a really good point. Well, I think it's perfectly illustrated by this. The Australian Christian lobby, prior to the termination of pregnancy, the late-term abortion bill, did some polling which showed, depending on where you were in the state, somewhere between 60 to 70, usually about 65% of South Australians didn't want that legislation. I did some polling out of my own office as well, and that was just before the bill went to Parliament, and it corroborated those figures. So in my mind, certainly in the case of the termination of pregnancy bill, around about 70% of South Australians didn't want that legislation, and it didn't get reflected in Parliament by our parliamentarians of all types. So I would actually say I'm not sure that parliaments across the country are actually reflecting the mood of the people. In many instances they may be, but in certain instances they're not. And I think that's why we're seeing the kickback that we're seeing in the birth of minor parties, or re-emergence, I should say, like Family First.
Well, you mentioned the Australian Christian Lobby, and Lyle Shelton, who used to head that, he's now with one of those minor parties, the Christian Democratic Party in New South Wales, and he's put an article up recently talking about Meet the Liberals, Why Anting Freedom of Religion. And he's talking about the likes of Tim Wilson, Trent Zimmerman, Warren Entsch, Dean Smith, Andrew Bragg, Dave Sharma. Isn't that the challenge in your broad church within the Liberal Party, is that those names are going to change, but there'll be people pushing those causes?
I think there's always a contest of ideas, and that's good. I mean, I think that when we lose that on any level, whether it swings to the left or the right, it's a bad thing. In relation to that particular observation, we look. The fact is this: the government of the day, it wasn't the parliament I was involved in, but that government made a promise to deliver this legislation after the Marriage Act amendment debate, same-sex marriage debate, and it's something that we need to do, and it's something that we won't water down. So look, there will be robust debate about that, but ultimately, it's my view that we need to deliver strong protections to religious freedoms, not only because it was a promise, but also because it's the right thing to do.
You have to be fair to be circumspect about the chances religious freedom changes might be legislated before a federal election, the way we've got 3 capital cities in lockdown at the moment.
Yeah, look, that is the challenge, and I think that's part of the reason why it hasn't happened earlier, to be fair. I think, the distraction of COVID over the last 18 months took a big slice out of the parliamentary sitting periods and so on. So, look, it needs to be a priority. I know the Attorney-General is across it, and it's been said that it'll be entered before December. I think we've talked about that before on your show. I'll certainly be pushing for that to happen, and I think it's really important. So, but look, time is certainly of the essence.
It certainly is of the essence, and you've been generous with your time. So thank you very much, Senator, for talking with us today.
Thanks again, Ricky. Cheers.